It's the end of June and there are no fights this week, so I'm going to recap all the different fighters who have been cut from the UFC roster this month. And at the very bottom of the screen, I provided photographs of the fighters that I feel have taken the worst losses through the last 30 days. And it would have been really funny to have checked my phone to see that any of these guys had been cut from the roster following really bad losses. To assist me in delivering this presentation, I will be using visual aids from Burt MMA, who I would like to extend a congratulations for winning your second pro MMA fight over the weekend. I saw it on Instagram Live. It was a beautiful rear naked choke that you secured a tap with. You almost got finished like Bo Nickel with that knee and the clincher break, but you did lock in, and that was a great performance, and you risked it all, and you won big, and I'm very proud of you. Congratulations to Burt MMA. Anyways, we're going to get right into the list. I feel like I owe you guys honesty whenever it comes to how I truly feel about Jon Jones, because I haven't really spoken on Jon Jones as a figure, and only the prospects of his match with Tom Aspinall, which we are no longer getting, and that is confirmed. Jon Jones, he stopped doing things that were relevant, and he himself was more relevant than his fights became towards the end of his career. You were excited to watch Jon Jones fight because of the work that he had done over 10 years ago whenever you watched him fight in 2024 and 2023. Those fights were not meaningful, and I would say that it's not his fault because heavyweight is not a deep division, but there were two different opportunities that he let pass to have really important fights with Hall of Fame fighters in the promotion's history, Francis Ngannou and also Tom Aspinall. These fights would have extended his legacy. He didn't fight Rumble Johnson, which would have been a good win for him to have. He could have beaten him because Daniel Cormier beat him. It didn't come without its own trials and tribulations because he was flung across the middle of the cage with an overhand, Daniel Cormier. But Jon Jones didn't want that fight. I think that duck is lighter than the term that it actually deserves to be called. This is cowardice. He didn't want to lose. And I get it, but it's not like Khabib was protecting his record from Conor or Dustin or Gaethje. In 2020, Gaethje, after beating Tony Ferguson, was like the boogeyman. So if anyone had the right to duck a fight, it would have been Khabib to duck Gaethje and take an easier matchup for his retirement fight. But that's just not what he did. And Jon Jones just continued to cherry pick and cherry pick and cherry pick and cherry pick. And we're like, Jon Jones, you're cherry picking. When are you going to fight an actual contender? And he was like, shut up, and didn't give us a straight answer until he retired. And I have a problem with that. Because as everyone was just hating on him and doing what I probably should have done this whole time and signing the petitions and stuff, I was actually keeping hope alive that one day we may actually get the fight with him and Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall is not Ngannou. He's rather untested. I felt like Jon Jones might have hung around to fight that guy because I viewed it as a fight that he could have won. He didn't, so he left. And I feel really empty towards the fact that heavyweight is in the state that it's in right now, and he didn't do anything to help it. If he would have beaten Tom Aspinall or just fought and lost, then we'd be looking at Tom Aspinall, who's now the lineal greatest fighter of all time because he beat Jon Jones, and he's just going to run this division, which everyone is going to love. Or you have Jon Jones, who beat Tom Aspinall and put an end to the hype and established himself as the most dominant fighter of all time. And the heavyweight division can go through a proper rebuilding process that would make fights like Alvin Hines versus Hinata Diniz easier to watch because we know it's in the name of us getting more contenders and that we have to endure this because we're going through a proper rebuilding period of heavyweight where there would be a vacant title, and then there would need to be someone who would rise to the occasion to grab it. Whether it would be Aspinall again through reinventing himself or some other guy, Jon Jones's legacy would then be solidified. And he didn't even give himself the chance to have the opportunity to have this undeniable legacy. He just rested on his laurels and said that his legacy was already undeniable while there were people questioning it and him and saying that there were people for him to fight, and there were still people for him to fight and he didn't fight them. So that's just my 2 cents. Jon Jones, it's easy to attack his character because he hasn't done great things in his life, but I'm a proponent for advocating mental health even for guys like him. There's clearly something wrong with Jon Jones, and I hope that he gets help. But he's an absolute jerk-off for not giving us this fight that we wanted to see, or these fights with these big power punchers and this highly skilled technical grappler at the heavier weight classes. We should have seen him fight Rumble. We should have seen him fight Ngannou. We should have seen him fight Aspinall. These were things that he needed to do in order to be undeniable as the greatest of all time, and he just didn't do it. To then say his entire legacy is a failure is not fair. But he dropped the ball here and a couple of other times, big time. And the Aspinall situation is worse because he could have pled that the UFC didn't want to pay him enough money to fight Francis before. But whatever number he came up with, Dana White said that he paid Jon Jones that number, was willing to pay him that number, and Jon Jones still didn't want to take the fight. So he did duck, and I'm sorry for ever saying that it was something else. It was never anything else. It was Jon Jones ducking this whole time. And I don't know what the efficacy of the petition was, or if like all of our outreach towards the social media accounts on the UFC pages worked. But Jon Jones had an opportunity to silence this crowd, and he did nothing. So that's his legacy, is being in question forever and never being able to prove himself. Rest in peace, Jon Jones. Conor Matthews is the next guy who got cut from the UFC. Conor Matthews is a guy who you watch get sparked up by a prospect that you've never heard of on the early prelim cards. It just happened to him against Yadier Del Valle and also Jose Miguel Delgado, who just knocked out Hyder Emil. And that was a huge upset, to be honest. Like, I didn't expect that to happen at all. Denis Buzukja wasn't the most successful after he fought with Conor Matthews. Conor Matthews gave the best rounds of his career to Denis Buzukja, and he still got knocked out in the third round of that fight. He lost his initial go at the Contender Series to Francis Marshall. Francis Marshall has been around in the UFC. He just recently fought with Myron Santos, I believe, and he lost that fight. In Denis Buzukja's last fight, he fought with Francis Marshall and also lost, so that is a guy, and he beat Conor Matthews. We know that Jose Miguel Delgado is also a guy, and he beat Conor Matthews. It's almost like knocking this guy out is a good luck charm for your career. He made 2 appearances on the Contender Series, and I've been trying to negotiate in my own head for a very long time whether or not that makes you good or bad. If you can lose your first Contender Series showing, go back to your regional circuit, win a couple of fights and come back and then win on the Contender Series, earn a contract, and then make it into the UFC. It's not like earning gold, it's just your seat at the table. So I'd say that makes you more bad than good at fighting, even if you do end up earning a contract. How he did in the UFC is clear evidence of this, in my opinion. He was impossible to predict. He was fresh off a win on the Ultimate Fighter against Cody Gibson, and Cody Gibson hadn't really shown his hand, the lack of skills that he possesses, until later on that year. And he had beaten Cody Gibson. I didn't know anything about Garrett Armfield going into their fight. Garrett Armfield is a pretty solid fighter, a power puncher. He ended up beating Brad Katona, and Brad Katona looked like absolute garbage in this fight, so I'd made it up in my head that I would never select him to win again. I select Jesse Butler to win in his next fight, and he beats Jesse Butler. So I'm like, I don't even know anymore. And just to be safe, I predicted that Brad Katona would lose his next 2 fights, and he did, but this guy was an absolute nightmare to watch footage for and be like, yeah, he's probably going to win or lose to this person, because he never did what he was supposed to do whenever it came to this. So Brad Katona is a 2-time Ultimate Fighter winner. That's where he's different from Conor Matthews, because Conor Matthews went to the Contender Series twice, and I feel like that'd be easier to swing than committing to a full season of a reality TV show 2 different times. And if that was his route to making it into the UFC and he would need to do that all over again in order to get another contract, then my heart actually kind of hurts for him. I hope that if he does end up being able to make it back to the UFC, then he can take a different route that doesn't involve him being in that freaking house again. Oh my gosh. The fact that he's been to the Ultimate Fighter twice is kind of the icing on the cake, proving that that is not that big of a feat. Ariane Lipski to Silva. This woman's low-key been around forever. 6 years is a long time to be in the UFC, and she hasn't done a whole lot of winning in this time. This is a girl who a woman like Kong Wang shows up and puts a whooping on in the 3rd fight of the entire card. Lipski to Silva doesn't really do a whole lot that's good. I mean, she's not the best striker. I mean, she has a submission over Casey O'Neill, but I don't know Casey O'Neill from a hole in the ground. The thing that's mighty concerning about her case, though, is that they turned her loose, and the reason why she had such an egregious weight miss against Kong Wang, it was like 7 or 8 pounds, is because she has a brain tumor in her pituitary gland. So hopefully she can get that resolved. That doesn't sound very good. And I hope that she has a steady stream of income to be able to afford the treatment for that, because I mean, the UFC isn't a charity case, so it kind of makes sense why they didn't want to make it their problem, but Cheyanne Vlismas is the next fighter who we're going to mention. WMMA cuts galore this month. I guess there were only 2, but this woman, she used to be Cheyanne Bays, and I got into the UFC in 2020 whenever this was just happened. She went from Cheyanne Vlismas to Cheyanne Vlismas, and JP Vlismas was her husband. They got into a divorce in 2023, I think it was, and it was so nasty, the fallout of it. She changed her last name, and that boy JP Vlismas was tripping, talking about Roman Dolidze was somewhere in Georgia with his woman. And she has babies by Roman Dolidze as well. And that's the reason why she retired. She made the sacrifice to not compete in the UFC, which she hasn't since 2022, in order to be with her children. And she said that she could have taken a comeback fight, but that would have meant months away from her kids, and she couldn't do it. And I do respect her for this, because not a lot of women, especially in 2025, would be willing to make this type of compromise. She is probably going to be okay to not work because her husband is Roman Dolidze, but she might be grime, because that boy JP said that she was out there cheating in Georgia with Roman Dolidze while they were together. After getting the details of this divorce, I can't believe that JP Vlismas didn't go on like a crazy run after this, dude. This would be the motivation that I needed to knock out Ilia Topuria if this happened to me. Do some research into why Cheyanne Vlismas and JP Vlismas aren't together anymore. Hakeem Dawodu has been cut. A lot of people are kind of scratching their heads as to why this happened. I think it's just how deep the featherweight division is. There's really no place for a fighter like this, outside of the rankings at least, because if you can't beat an old man Cub Swanson, then you're not a significant test for another guy who could be paired with Cub Swanson for a debut outing. Or just a guy outside of the rankings who may be serious about starting a run. Let's have him fight Cub Swanson real quick. That's a better test than like 60% of all of the active fighters in featherweight outside of the rankings. And they're kind of thinning them out now. And that's the reason why Hakeem Dawodu is no longer going to be with us. If we're talking about outside the rankings gatekeepers, Hakeem Dawodu is insufficient because he lost to Julian Erosa. And Julian Erosa is the perfect definition of that. We just saw in his fight against Melquizael Costa. Melquizael Costa, he did lose to Steve Garcia, I think, but a win over Julian Erosa outside the rankings is exactly what you need in order to gain hype so you can start your own run, because that's a very significant win. Hakeem Dawodu has been put in positions to start his run by being the guy who fights Cub Swanson or being the dude match made with Julian Erosa, and he just didn't win. But a big thing to note is that he hasn't fought since 2023, so this is likely on the account of injuries. They just don't want to keep him on the roster because he's likely very hurt right now and works an IT desk job at this point because he hasn't fought in 2 years, and before then it was a whole year. I hope he's doing well, man. I'd never root against any of these people just because I've been a guy who has been laid off from a job before, and I've had to go back to my car and do the walk of shame back into my house and get on Indeed, bro. So this is a bad feeling, and I don't wish it for any of you guys watching or for any of the fighters on the UFC roster. That unemployment really do sting like a mug whenever it's forced upon you and it's not your choice. Quitting a job is like, whatever, motherfucker. I'm about to go home and play Fortnite. It doesn't make a difference to me. But you get fired, bro. Like, ouch. Kron Gracie, be nice. Be nice. What I just said about not being happy about people getting fired, I can say at least that his submission over Alex Caceres wasn't horrible. It was fed to him by Caceres, who just didn't see this coming at all. It was Kron Gracie's debut, so he couldn't place exactly how good his jiu-jitsu was going to be or how much he would rely on it. But Kron Gracie was sniffing up against the cage. He took the back immediately, engaging with the boxing and putting on this coy pretend act like he was going to stand with Alex Caceres, and then getting to a body lock immediately to get a trip, falling to the back sitting position, and then wrapping up in RNC. It was so easy for him, and he did it really fast. His issue has always been fighting with people he can't take down, because he quickly looks like a buffoon whenever he can't get his grappling going, because his stand-up is garbage. Cub Swanson beat the brakes off of this guy, and it's like, this is the test. It's Cub Swanson in 2019 was 6 years younger than he is right now. I would wager to say that Cub Swanson right now beats Kron Gracie in that same fight where he lost that unanimous decision. And that's just how bad Kron Gracie's striking has always been. It's kind of shameful too, because he just pulls guard. He doesn't even try to wrestle. If he knows that you're a guy who's stronger than him and he can't take you down, he's just going to get close, get double overhooks, and then like wrap them up overwards, and he's just going to pull guard. It's so cringe. And a lot of people are just standing up and just leaving him there on the ground on his back. And it's a waste of time. Just because if I wanted to watch some ADC grappling, I would just do that, you know? This guy is forcing us to watch gi jiu-jitsu done with no gi. I don't know how that's even possible. It's like the worst type of jiu-jitsu being done in the octagon. And it only worked once. So it's not enough for me to say like good riddance, because again, like, dude, he lost his job. That sucks. You're really gonna celebrate that? I don't know what he's gonna do from here. Kron Gracie, he's got some things to figure out. He's no longer in the UFC roster. Peace be with him. I hope that he's doing well. So those are gonna be my picks, fellas. Thank you for sticking around to this point in the video. Thank you for all the support in general that you guys have been showing. I applied for the first tier of YouTube partnership today, and this has all happened so fast, and I am so grateful to you guys for the fact that you're holding this project that I'm pouring so much into up. Because I remember that there were days where I would get on here and I would do this, and it would be a lot harder than it was now without my PC, and nobody would watch. Nobody would watch. I would get 8 views and I would smile and feel happy. One person liked it. I didn't even like my own videos because I felt like it was cheap the whole time. And I probably hurt my interactions a lot and still do by the fact that I don't really like my own videos like that. But you guys do. And thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It motivates me so much whenever I get positive feedback on the work that I'm doing here. So I'm going to stay with it. You guys have a wonderful day. I'm going to catch you fellas in the next upload.